Okay, hi, my name is Venkat Thota. I'm a graduate student at Tufts. I'm studying computer engineering. And this is my presentation on thermodynamical properties of self-similarity and collective intelligence.
Speak loud.
Uh, so what is the motivation behind this topic? So I was listening to Dr. Wilfram present, and he started talking about a problem regarding cellular automata and stress. It got me thinking about how I could map it myself. And then I was interested in fractals. Because one thing about fractals is that they kind of autocomplete, right? And I was curious, like, how does a natural element like understand how it completes itself? So then and then I read Levin's work, Michael Levin's work, right? Uh, so I saw a pattern in Levin's work. Levin, you should talk a lot. He was talking about how stress sharing kind of acted like a collective intelligence in the system. But one thing I found interesting is that he would always mention elements of thermodynamics, but there was never a view from the point of thermodynamics. I don't understand like why he wouldn't mention thermodynamics. I'm not trying to debate what Michael Levin wrote. I'm trying to give a perspective from the point of thermodynamics. So, the natural question is, in Levin's paper, Stress Sharing as a Cognitive Loop of Collective Intelligence, he kind of goes on to explain like how a lizard's tail, once chopped off, uses stress in the cells to combine again, right? So if I'm going to present a case for thermodynamics as a basis for connection, I need to look at like history, right? I mean, is there already a paper present? I found a paper which talked about how thermodynamics could be used to connect biological cells. So in this paper, they found a way to describe how a cut would heal itself through thermodynamics. I found that really interesting, and this was just like helping me like build on that idea of using thermodynamics. And then I found this another paper talking about collective intelligence through thermodynamics. This was a paper which I actually saw before in Santa Fe Institute was talking about this. And I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. Like they talk about like intelligence through a framework of thermodynamics. And then one thing I noticed was I recognized a pattern, right? Like there was a pattern in all of like cells, like a repeating pattern. And in Brown University, actually, they came out saying that, yeah, there are fractal patterns in cells. And fractal patterns are actually pretty universal. So this is a fractal pattern in nature, right? This is like a fractal pattern in a snow. Yeah. So I wanted to introduce like this one concept which I read before called fractal thermodynamics. And fractal thermodynamics kind of incorporates the idea of thermodynamics at the same time using fractals, and this ensures a continuity. This was actually kind of like inspired by what Penrose once wrote in his book Road to Reality. So I just like looked into this phenomenon more, and so there are some phenomena which when we had like Sinclair and one other Russian professor present. Yeah. He mentions how epigenetic clocks for each organ is different, right? So if each organ has its own epigenetic clock, I asked him a question, so does having a warm temperature affect the epigenetic clock? What he told me was warm temperatures can negatively affect an epigenetic clock. I think even Sinclair talks about this idea. So my understanding of that was, okay, what if you introduced, like, isn't that like thermodynamics? Like, isn't that like even the tail, when it grows back, even Levin talks about this, there's a lot of stress according to Levin, but he never mentions it as like a way for the system to calm itself down. Because whenever in thermodynamic system, there's a lot of energy, it cools itself down by like vibrating. So it got me thinking, like, okay, if this is taking place on a cellular level, like a system trying to balance itself out, and he explains it through homeostasis, I'm sorry. So he explains it through that way, and yeah, so I'm trying to like not trying to, but I'm trying to like give a lens to you guys that maybe there's a way to explain morphogenesis to fractal thermodynamics. And the questions I want to explore is like all this while I've gone ahead with an assumption of genetic history. There are ways to explore this through Markov models, and this is actually talked about a lot in Santa Fe Institute since 1998, actually. And I wanna, so yeah, this epigenetic clock of the lizard's tail, I saw a lot of heat, like papers were describing how heat was being produced, like a distress signal from the cells. What if that's like increasing the epigenetic clock? Because warm temperatures does affect epigenetic clock according to some papers, right? And maybe that's like, causing it. And I want to like explore how we could use like fractal calculus. I think there's some things interesting about that. Yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Go. So there is in the way that the brain represents information, multifractality, which means there's a continuum of exponents that represent different aspects of how the brain is representing the world. And there's this like corollary of information dynamics and thermodynamics and sort of entropy as a unifying force. For thinking of this idea of fractal thermodynamics. Interestingly enough, the brain operates at the state of quasi-criticality, which is essentially a threshold where it's able to propagate information through the brain, but not only through the brain, the entire nervous system, the entire body is connected in that feedback loop. And so that might have to do with a lot of how the body regulates itself from all scales. And it's interesting because you can also look at much larger scales, such as where does our food come from, and what types of food allow certain kinds of processes.
And like according to the brain, like there's this concept called fractal-brachiality. So a lot of like natural systems use that. And one thing I've noticed is like entropy is a measure of time. Because like that's how when the universe was created, like we use as a direction to entropy, right? So I feel like you can kind of like because what is time, right? So is it like can you use entropy as a reference? So I don't know. I'm sorry.
One-liner comments for the next speaker. There's a publication within the last few weeks by John Speakman, his last author, and it specifically addressed what you were discussing, the second point regarding metabolism, connection with aging and biology, and he looked at caloric restriction versus protein restriction, which through independent mechanisms may delay aging in some organisms and context, and looking at the percentage of difference of the expected variance accounted for by the thermodynamic differences of that as an energy source, and that explained the majority.
Can I just say something to what you're saying? Like, so a lizard's tail, when it's chopped off and regrows again, it actually grows back in a different pattern. It's significantly worse. So I want to understand like the cellular change thing, and like what would happen if you starve the lizard, and how would the tail grow back? Once it's starving. Like that's something I want to